This presentation is going to be on alcohol abuse throughout the Inuit populations and communities. I chose to do alcohol abuse because I feel like it's controversial not just in the United States but throughout the whole world. In the Inuit population and communities even more so because they live in a rural part that I feel is more directly hit by alcohol dependency and dependent related problems. Alcohol dependency for the purpose of this paper or alcohol abuse is going to be how or when it affects everyday life or on a personal level. So whether it's personal relationships, everyday activities, when it starts to become a problem, that's what is going to define alcohol abuse for the purpose of this presentation. So alcohol abuse is a major problem for the Inuit population. I think we need to start with a little more information about their population and community because I think it's necessary to see the effects and causes of alcohol abuse throughout previous and current times. The Inuit people primarily live in Canada, Alaska, and also in some parts of Russia and Greenland. Like many Alaska Native peoples, the Inuit were introduced to alcohol by whalers, fur traders, and settlers of outside people. This wasn't always a part of their culture or their communities. It hit them from the outside kind of like a brick wall. I feel like they were pressured, the curiosity, and also they used alcohol as a release from their culture changing due to colonization. Both Inuit men and women were and are affected by the introduction and continuous use of alcohol in their communities. Also, both men and women of Inuit ethnicity abuse alcohol at about equal rates. It's a society in which women do abuse or have just as much of an alcohol problem as men do. Now, alcohol rates are lower in the Inuit population versus national averages because they tend to drink less frequently or less Inuit people drink, but they drink in heavier amounts. This is known as binge drinking. We'll talk about that in a minute. Many Inuit communities have acknowledged an alcohol problem or issue in their community or villages. This isn't just a hearsay. This has been noted as a problem in the Inuit population and communities by their own people. These are the areas where the Inuit population reside. I just wanted to show you that they do primarily live in rural areas, and I think that this has more of a role with alcohol dependency and use, so I just wanted you to get a better grasp of the areas that they live in. Okay, so let's start off with the rates of alcohol consumption. 77% of the Inuit population are or were occasional or regular drinkers, and a quarter of those drinkers reported their consumption to be 5 or more drinks on the same occasion. This is binge drinking. These instances were reported to happen at least once a week and are 3 times higher than that of the national average. This is what I was talking about, how maybe less of the Inuit population drink, but the way that they drink is more rigorous and it's more of a vicious cycle. It is more considered alcohol abuse than alcohol use. So how do the Inuit feel about this issue of alcohol? Well, alcohol use and abuse is a major concern for the First Nations and the Inuit communities. 75% of residents said they feel alcohol use is a problem in their communities. 33% indicated it's a problem in their own family, and even 25% say themselves have an alcohol problem. They've recognized the issues in their communities, and once that you've noticed that there's a problem, you can say that it's an epidemic because these are self-reported manners due to the fact that they are in rural villages. That's the method that they use. And so the numbers may actually even be higher than what's reported. Many people don't want to report that they have an alcohol problem or that their community does. And so we may even be just getting the short end of the stick on the estimates. So kind of like I was saying before, alcohol abuse in the Inuits is not limited to Inuit men. It's almost as an equal proportion of Inuit women that abuse alcohol or suffer from an alcohol-related dependency. It's only about a 10% gap between men and women alcohol users. This can play a pretty severe role because the issue that lies of Inuit women's struggle with alcohol doesn't only affect her as the individual, but also that of her children. What I mean is 61% of Inuit pregnant women reported drinking alcohol during her pregnancy. That is a tremendously high number. And 38% reported binge drinking. This is 5 or more drinks at a time while pregnant. Many issues for unborn children, such as fetal alcohol syndrome, can come from alcohol use during pregnancy. It can affect not only the health of the mother, but also that of the child. So this high number of Inuit women reported drinking shows that there's a major issue of alcohol use and abuse in their communities. But the elder men and women aren't the only ones who struggle with alcohol use. Inuit youth also struggle with it. As a matter of fact, Inuit youth in Baffin were showed to be 2 to 3 times more likely than their peers to abuse alcohol. And girls as young as 14 in the community were more likely to binge drink in excess. I think access and predisposure to alcohol from family and community members may be in part to blame for such high occurrences. That or the fact that there are not many outside activities, and so boredom living in a rural community can play a role in the activity of alcohol use. But either way, the youth of the population are just as affected as the adults, and many of these children tend to stay in the communities for their whole life. They're a pretty tight-knit community, and so the Inuit youth are getting a pattern of drinking that they will carry over into adulthood that just repeats this cycle. I just wanted to show you that the alcohol use levels compared to that of the lower 48 in Alaska is statistically higher. And a big part of this is the Alaska Native population. And if you notice that the rural areas of many states are the ones that have a higher alcohol concentration. Okay, so I want to touch on binge drinking because, like I talked about a little bit earlier, the Inuit don't have as high of a national average as that of other drinkers, but they do tend to drink in excess or binge drink. So binge drinking is drinking heavy amounts of alcohol in a short time. This is especially potent form of alcohol abuse and is very common, especially in dry Inuit villages. Because in dry villages, there are consequences. It's against the law to drink. And so many people drink as much as they can, as fast as they can, in short periods of time. And there may be gaps of weeks or months in between when they can drink. And so they pretty much drink to get intoxicated, which is the worst form of alcohol abuse that there can be. Or you have bootleggers who, in communities who are dry or have limited access, have more potent forms of alcohol that they are drinking. So there are many effects of alcohol abuse in the Inuit communities, including violence, various kinds of abuse, accidents, self-inflicted injuries, and death. These are just immediate effects. There are also longer-term effects such as involvement in the justice system, going to jail, neglect of their children, employment problems, and personal behavior issues. There's really not a part of the Inuits' lives that alcohol abuse does not affect. I think the most major consequence from alcohol abuse in the Inuit communities is suicide. The suicide rates have been increasing right alongside alcohol use in Inuit communities. In 2004, 14% of Inuit had seriously considered taking their lives, and 6.7% attempted suicide in the previous year. In terms of a lifetime, 21% had attempted suicide, and 35% had considered it. This is a terribly high number for small communities. So what can be done to stop these issues that are stemming from alcohol abuse and use in the Inuit population? Well, in 1981, small communities were granted the right to regulate alcohol in their communities. Some villages allow for unlimited sale of alcohol still, some allow for limited, and some allow for none. These are considered dry villages. Dry villages do seem to reduce alcohol-related injuries, and so seem to be the first step in prevention. While it cannot fully stop alcohol use and abuse, it does seem to deter it, and so it seems to be the first line of defense. I think more than anything, the issue lies in the fact that most rural Inuit villages and/or communities aren't large enough to support the local police force. Liquor laws are enforced by the Alaska Department of Public Safety, and bootlegging is prosecuted through the state. So enforcement in the villages just aren't really a possibility. Until the villages get adequate resources and protection, they aren't going to be able to support a system that prevents this alcohol abuse and use. So then what is there to do, right? Well, the Inuits rely primarily on alcohol abuse and substance abuse programs for treatment, often outside of their village or community. A change needs to be taken, such as developing more recreational activities, utilizing spiritual and religious resources, creating family treatment options, and in-town treatment facilities. Many of the Inuits who want to seek help have to do so outside of their hometown, which deters anybody. So I think the best solution would be a revolution of revival of the Inuit people's traditional culture. For colonization and loss of culture is a main contributor to the issue of alcohol use. The introduction of cash economy, military culture, police, court systems, religious practices, and the educational system resulted in a dramatic change. Going back to a more traditional village style of living seems to be a good fit to control alcohol. So through this presentation, I've shown you that there is a high number of Inuit population that has an alcohol dependency or alcohol-related issue or problem. We are seeing an upward trend of alcohol use and abuse in the youth, in women, and also higher levels of instances of suicide, of self-harm, of accidents, all that leads us to the conclusion that there's a major alcohol problem throughout these communities. But there's hope. There's hope in tradition, in change, and in the future. And this population has made strides to get these problems under control. They have acknowledged that there is an issue. And so I think for the future matters that the Inuit people are going to continue to strive to keep their culture alive and to take their population back to a more traditional form of living so as to fit their needs. Thank you everyone for listening, and I just kind of want to end this with a quote that I found that just described this whole thing. And it goes, "There was a kindliness about intoxication. There was that indescribable gloss and glamour it gave, like the memories of infernal and fated evenings." Just kind of sums it up.